So picture this. It's 1903. Theodore Roosevelt has just finished this incredibly famous camping trip in Yosemite with none other than John Muir. You know, the 65-year-old, heavily bearded mountain man who's basically the global face of American conservation. But jump forward just 4 months, and where does this absolute icon of the Sierra Nevada end up? In the sweltering, tropical, deeply historical landscape of British-ruled India. I mean, it's a completely unexpected twist, right? So what exactly was John Muir doing there? And more importantly, what did he see?
In this explainer, we're going to retrace the 6 distinct stops on Muir's incredible Indian expedition. 1. His arrival in Calcutta. 2. The Darjeeling toy train. 3. Holy waters and history. 4. The gardens of Agra. 5. Simla's sacred deodars. And finally, 6. His final stop in Bombay.
When you look at his itinerary, you realize he had just a single month to pull this off. He was making these massive 400-plus-mile jumps across the vast subcontinent, setting the stage for an absolute whirlwind travelogue. You know, unlike his famous 1,000-mile walk to the Gulf on foot, India's immense scale literally forced him to use boats, horse-drawn carriages, and a massive network of railways just to get around.
All right, stop number 1, arrival in Calcutta, from steamy streets to botanical havens.
The contrast right out of the gate is just wild. On one hand, you have the crowded, bustling imperial streets of Calcutta. But Muir, he basically ignored those magnificent government buildings. Instead, pretty much the moment he woke up, he made an immediate botanical pilgrimage to the enormous Great Banyan tree in the Royal Botanic Garden. This massive tree grows these aerial roots that drop down and look like an entire forest of trunks. It was a sight Muir had been dying to witness for years.
Moving to stop number 2, the Darjeeling toy train, ascending to the Himalayas. Now, traveling 400 miles to an elevation of 7,000 feet back then was absolutely no easy feat. First, he took a long ferry ride across the incredibly wide Ganges River. Then, a broad-gauge railway carried him northward. And finally, at a station called Siliguri, he transferred to a multimodal transit system that culminated in something truly special.
Muir was absolutely delighted by the famous Darjeeling toy train. I mean, the tracks were a mere 2 feet wide. He wrote in his journal all about how the scenery just rapidly changed around him, with these sharp, crazy curves and switchbacks, pulling him away from the sweltering heat of the plains and straight up into the snow-cooled, breezy mountain heights.
And getting up there to witness those spectacular Himalayan peaks, like Kanchenjunga, well, that was the prime objective of his entire visit. He actually wrote, "This so far is the most interesting part of my trip. I'm so thankful God has let me see his Himalaya." He celebrated those glorious views, later describing the mountains in his writings as being bathed in this reverent, divine amber light.
Which brings us to stop 3, holy waters and history, culture shock on the plains.
Over the course of just 3 days, Muir packed in stops at Benares, Lucknow, and Kanpur. He was taking in scenes of intense religious devotion right alongside these really somber visits to British war memorials. It's this rapid-fire cultural immersion that most of us just don't typically associate with the great wilderness naturalist.
Take the ancient city of Benares, for instance. Muir stood there and watched tens of thousands of worshippers bathing in the holy Ganges River at sunrise. But, true to form, he also found time to observe the local wildlife. He hung out at a monkey temple, where macaques roamed totally free, and he noted, with quite a bit of amusement actually, how the mother monkeys cared for their babies by just abruptly yanking them back from danger by the tail.
By October 10th and 11th, the vibe shifted again. He was quietly observing the bullet-battered walls of the Lucknow Residency and the horrifying 1857 mutiny sites at Kanpur. But here's the fascinating thing. Even in these places of incredibly heavy human history, he still made sure to note in his journals that the surrounding park spaces and trees were absolutely magnificent.
Stop number 4, Gardens of Agra, a naturalist view of monuments.
This is where Muir's unique perspective really stands out. While most travelers were entirely mesmerized by the man-made historical monuments, Muir's journals reveal this fascinating nature versus man juxtaposition. To him, the stone buildings were fine, but the living, breathing plants framing those buildings, those were the real showstoppers.
So, when Muir looked at the Taj Mahal, he was mostly looking at the plants. He briefly acknowledged the exquisite architecture, and he admired the Pearl Mosque, sure,
But what he truly reveled in were the expansive gardens, the sunken flower beds, and the multiple avenues of trees surrounding the famous tomb. That's what really caught his eye.
It was the same story with massive structures like the Red Fort in Agra and later the Gates of Delhi. He appreciated their noble simplicity. But honestly, his heart wasn't really in the cities. It was already pulling him back toward those high-altitude forests he loved so deeply.
Which takes us to stop 5, Simla's sacred deodars, returning to his element.
Reunited with his beloved mountain ecosystems, this time via a thrilling pre-railroad mail Tonga ride on October 15th, Muir was suddenly back in his absolute element. His journals, which had been somewhat brief regarding the world-famous architecture, suddenly exploded into these lengthy, deeply passionate entries. He described the deodar cedar forests in painstaking detail, literally down to the level of individual needles and branches, seeing the whole landscape as a profoundly devout, worshipful space.
Looking out over the deodar-covered ridges of Simla, Muir found the divine, sacralized landscape where he felt most at home. Just like the giant sequoias of California, these incredible trees, which are relatives of the famous cedars of Lebanon, completely captured his profound spiritual and ecological reverence.
And finally, stop 6, final stop in Bombay, the global naturalist.
Heading toward his departure, Muir took a long, slow train ride across the country. Crawling along at just 25 miles per hour, he used his final days in India to observe absolutely everything out the window. He was noting the agaves, feeling pity for banyan trees struggling in a southern drought, and eagerly pressing his face to the glass looking for tigers, elephants, and camels. Arriving in Bombay on October 21st to prep for Cairo, he had well and truly cemented his status, not just as an American conservationist, but a global one. Seeing John Muir find the exact same divine wilderness in the towering Himalayas and the sprawling banyans of India as he did in the granite cliffs of Yosemite leaves us with a pretty provocative thought. True reverence for nature clearly knows absolutely no borders. If a 65-year-old man back in 1903 could travel across the world and see the exact same sacred beauty in every single tree and peak, how might that change the way we look at our own global environment today?